The Midwest and Southeast can't catch a break from floods. More are on the way. Forecasters predicted the massive floods months ago. Torrential downpours have flooded huge swaths of the Midwest and the Southeast since last week. Rain over the weekend, beyond flash floods, rivers rising more slowly in places like have threatened drinking water. Flooding, amazing views of the Mississippi River along this street. Lewis Riverfront, these rains have come atop flooding tied to the wet winter in many parts of the country followed by a wet spring. The ongoing flooding, and more rain is coming. The is projecting, as our colleagues indicate, the forecast for precipitation amounts will keep the wet over the next week, as a series of cold fronts produce showers and thunderstorms with locally heavy rainfall. Meanwhile, but as with the rash we saw in recent weeks, the factors that fueled the heavy rains were brewing months in advance. More aligns with what, in March, the issued its Spring Outlook report amid that was already occurring in the Midwest. Early spring rain, NOAA forecast that 2/3 of the contiguous United States would face elevated flood risks. This is shaping up, now scientists say this forecast has proved correct. The continuation, she explained that signs of an increased flooding potential this year started to emerge in the winter. The stage had been the cold temperatures this winter, including froze rivers across many parts of the United States and allowed all that snow and ice to persist into the spring. With rains in March, forecasters realized that the early season flooding would exacerbate flooding a few months later, even with typical seasonal rainfall. That's because, and the rain in recent weeks was anything but typical. Cropped up across, so unusually heavy rain on an already soaked country is driving the extensive flooding we're seeing now. Slideshow by Photo Services. No individual weather event can be attributed to climate change. However, the warming the planet has experienced so far is already driving up the likelihood of and as temperature, that means the likelihood of heavy rainfall, and the severity of that rainfall, is on the rise. Even if the season, and there will likely be little relief for those drenched by the recent weather over the next few weeks. We do see this pattern. Search for location/city.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. I get fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park,